Hi, what you're about to see is an interview with a vendor in the space in and around data mesh. We'd like to thank Nick Heudecker for graciously doing these interviews with vendors. We'd also like to make it clear that the data mesh community and data mesh learning doesn't necessarily endorse anything that these vendors are talking about, but that we wanted to give them a voice to talk about what they may offer in the space, so people are aware of vendors, because obviously if everybody has to build everything themselves, the data mesh is going to be pretty hard. So with that, we really thank Nick for doing this great work, and we hope that this is good and useful to you.
All right, everyone. My name is Nick Heudecker. This is the second data mesh learning interview. I'm joined with by Luke Feeney today from TerminusDB. Once again, I'm Nick Heudecker, former Gartner analyst, now senior director of market strategy at Cribl. And if you're not familiar with Cribl, you can look at either of these two links and find out more about us, try our sandbox, and see what we can do for your observability data. So with that, I want to turn it over to Luke. Luke, tell me a little bit about TerminusDB.
Hi, Nick. I'm Luke. I'm Luke Feeney. I am the COO of TerminusDB. We are a data management, as the name gives it away, enterprise out of Dublin in Ireland. So our backstory is we were working as researchers in Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland's oldest university, and worked on a very large European-wide project to build data infrastructure for complex historical databases. And then spun out a company on the back of that. We used to be called Data Chemist, and we changed our name to our main product, which is TerminusDB, in 2019, 2020.
You're a fairly new company. Or is that just
we're new, yeah. So we spun out in 2018, so we're pretty new. Okay. So we've only been a couple of years around the block. We raised some money when we came out of university and kind of pre-seed transition funding from the Irish government and from a couple of private VCs here in Dublin. And then we recently raised another round earlier this year, kind of seed round of about 3 million euros. So we're expanding a little bit. We're still small. We're 12 people, and we're kind of trying to be at the cutting edge of thinking around how people organize and manage their data.
So you're spun out of Trinity College. I think that's going to be interesting for the audience, right? Like, is there a formal technology transfer office at Trinity, or is this something you guys had to figure out?
So there is a formal technology transfer office, and kind of the way it went for us is we won this big funding grant from the European Commission. It was 4 million euros, and it was bringing together a whole bunch of European universities, research institutes, and private sector actors to do research around building these large scale complex schemas with a lot of uncertainty within them. And we were kind of going through that, and we started to think, maybe there's something that's commercially viable in here, and maybe we can turn this into something that we can then spin out. So we started to engage with the technology transfer office in Trinity College. We also did a big private sector proof of concept with a company called Wolters Kluwer. They're a Dutch-German multinational. They have a big financial services arm in the US, in New York as well. But they started off as a book publisher and have now become big in legal tech and reg tech and stuff like that. But we worked with their commercial intelligence arm to build a knowledge graph, a graph of the entire Polish economy back to the fall of the Warsaw Pact, and a version graph. So kind of showing you all of the changes to those networks over the last 30 years. And with that, we kind of felt we had enough collateral that we could go out and try and spin out and raise some money so we could hire some more engineers to make it more production grade. But, as anybody who's worked through startups, and particularly, I suppose, technical startups like that, there's a lot of twists and turns on the route to any sort of success. Yeah, and I suppose what we did when we came out, Trinity College is an investor in us. They're on our cap table, and we're really proud to be a Trinity College campus company. We use them a lot as a resource as a partner, and we hire a lot of people out of there. We try to hire people out of there. So that's where it works really well. Now, I'd have to say that I would prefer some of the US ways of approaching tech transfer. Stanford, for example, where they're more, look, we'll let you go, do your work, but the expectation is if you're successful, then you'll give some money back, rather than haggling over, percentages on the way out the door.
Interesting. No, I wasn't aware of that difference in technology transfer. That's a great insight. So now that you've got a product, TerminusDB, what does it do? You mentioned knowledge graph. That's been a hot topic. Topic kind of like fades in and out of interest, right? I think now we're seeing kind of a lot more interest in knowledge graph, at least the concept, if not products around it. So tell me how TerminusDB works. What does it do? So
just to give you a little bit of the evolution of TerminusDB. So we started off building large scale graph systems. So, graph database, linking concepts together at large scale, and working with, large industrial customers to build those, to do better predictions, basically better predictions across large bodies of connected data, where you're doing a lot of path queries, looking for the shortest path across that data, and those sorts of queries. So just made a lot of sense to have the data stored in a graph format, in a graph shape. It's a very graph shaped data. We then, we were spending a lot of time doing implementations with large scale customers, found that the entire company was becoming, a little bit too consultancy oriented. So we went back to the drawing board, polished up the technology and open sourced the database in 2019. And what it is basically is a versioned knowledge graph. So a knowledge graph is linked data. It's data that's all linked together by its connections across between the various entities, and allows you to store it in what we'd consider a much more natural format. It's more natural because it better represents the way the world really is. And it's unnatural and requires a lot of marshalling in and out to store things in tables and relational databases often. And so for lots of types of data and lots of types of problems, having your data stored in a graph makes more sense. And then a knowledge graph makes more sense again, because really the idea with the knowledge graph is to make it more business concept oriented. So to have a strong semantic layer that sits on top of that graph database that allows ordinary business analysts and other people to interact with it in a straightforward way without having to have lots of specialized data engineering knowledge. And what we do, what TerminusDB really does well is versioning schema and versioning data. So allowing you to have a versioned schema and data that you can then serve up in a guaranteed way from your domain team to other people in your organization. And we like to think about it as a schema, as an API in a sense. Downstream team, I give you a guarantee that this schema is going to remain like this until I come and speak to you about changing it. And so you're offering up that guarantee, but at the same time, I can take a version of that data and schema, and I can continue working and developing and making things better. And then, should the time arise that everybody's in agreement that this is better, it's had its testing, then I can merge it back into the main one that served up to the rest of the organization. So trying to take some of those.
Let's stop there for a second, though.
Sure.
Because
Nick, you'll notice that I'm Irish, so I can just speak forever. So you're definitely going to have to interrupt me.
I will. Now that I know that, good to know. So let's say I've created this schema, right? And you're talking to the data mesh learning community. That schema is going to be, I imagine, like a data product, right? That's how you're going to be kind of encapsulating that idea, right? You've got a domain, they're creating their products and so on. How do you actually consume that data, right? It's often like when I talk to graph database vendors, there's the world is a graph, right? Lots of vendors will say that, but it's often very difficult to get people thinking in graphs, right? We see tables all day, right? I live in Excel, right? And so I think it's hard to get people to make that conceptual leap. So how are they actually, or how are you packaging up that data so people can consume it in ways that make sense to them, right? Whether it's in a BI tool or something else. What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point because we kind of, you're right about graph data. One of the problems is that we haven't kind of evolved a world of BI tools that well represent it. Typically, when you're getting something out into a BI tool, you're flattening it into relational data and then serving it up into the BI tool. So you might as well use the relational data. So for us, that's something that we've really struggled with. So we definitely see it in a data product sort of way, that a domain team would be creating a data product and then they'd be looking to serve it up to other people across the organization. And one of the things that we've done in this latest iteration of TerminusDB, which is about to release, which is 5.0, is that we've made it much more JSON. So we have we speak JSON in and out of the database. We make it more Python, so we have a Python client, so you can remain in the world that you typically operate in as a data scientist, as a data engineer, and just trying to bring the concept to people much more. But there's no doubt that there is a learning curve. I mean, we have a query language which is data log based. So, and not SQL, but very powerful, but does require people to pick up some concepts along the way. Again, the idea with our latest iteration is that we have a document API. Everything is JSON-like, and we're trying to keep people in the JSON world that they know and love. So trying to kind of take what's best about MongoDB and then make it structured with schemas. Make it something that you can, rely on and guarantee and scale well. And that's kind of our idea, is to have a document graph. And I think that kind of responds that, there's no real way around it to say that, somebody who's used to the relational world and used to Excel can just jump across. They can't. They have to kind of,
they need to have some kind of on-ramp, right? They've got to have some kind of on-ramp to be able to kind of translate what they know into what you're presenting. So TerminusDB, I think in data mesh context, it's very much data product focused. Are there capabilities in your product or maybe on the roadmap around, say, federated governance or data discovery as part of it? Are those things that you're thinking about adding, or is it very much the data product story today that you're focused on?
So very much focused on the data product story, the version data product story, very much focused on trying to make life easier for domain teams so that you don't need such specialized skills in order to build, curate, and share data products. Very much focused on trying to build an ecosystem of data products downstream so that they can communicate with each other, so they can, have the sorts of triggers that you might expect. But at the same time, discovery in particular is such an important topic for any system like that. We're definitely thinking about how we integrate with data catalogs, how we might, build something like that internally, how we might serve up a catalog of the available schema. So definitely that's the route that we're going down, because, if you've got a large organization with thousands of schema, having a catalog and a way to discover what schemas are available and what data products available is going to be essential. In terms of governance, governance is a good one because, with an immutable data store like ours, you get some great benefits because we have a commit graph. So you can see everybody who's made all the commits into the database at any particular time. You can also roll back the database data product to any point in the past and query it as though it's today. So you can, look into the past. So for audit purposes and things like that, you've got very powerful and fundamental tooling built into TerminusDB and into your data products.
So explain it to me. Like, okay, you say when you query it, you can see the difference between, version 1, version 2, et cetera. How do I query it, right? Is it a command line? I can't imagine that's the preferred interaction. But what does that look like?
So we deliver it with the UI.
It is a UI. Okay.
We have a UI. So we've tried to, in this iteration. So to kind of maybe double back to our story a little bit, we then after our kind of episode with nearly becoming a consultancy and open sourcing, we then went out into the world and we saw that data management was a nightmare. And we read some stuff about maybe building something that's like Git for data. And there was a bunch of stuff around about people talking about Git for data. And we tried to mirror that in our architecture to make it like Git and GitHub for data. And we missed a lot of the pieces, though, that we then discovered in data mesh when we came across the kind of writings of Zhamak and others about like what was fundamentally in this concept. And a lot of that is around, domain teams and how you organize an enterprise in order to make this something that's effective and not just another tool that gets piled on all the existing tools. So yeah, I think that our evolution has been towards making something that's robust like that as well.
Let's shift over into your customers, right?
Yeah.
You guys have been around for a while. 5.0 is on the horizon. Congratulations. It's a pretty big version number, right?
For semantic versioning, of course, just means that we've broken the API 5 times.
Don't tell anybody that. You're not supposed to tell that. But so when customers and prospects are approaching you, what kind of pain points are they having? Are there themes around data problems that you're like, yep, we're a great fit for that. We're not such a great fit for these other things. How's that working right now with prospects?
Yeah, I mean, it's working pretty well. I mean, a lot of people that we would have, we're working with at the moment would be very keen on building data models, that they can serve up to other bits of the organization. That's an important feature for the types of customers that we're looking at. And that we're working with. So we have a strong base of customers in retail. So people are building version data products of parts of their organization. Sometimes it can be product lists that they then want to serve up to a whole suite of different users. So they might have some people that are Pythonistas and they want to do it via the Python client, which we offer integrated into TerminusDB. Some people in the organization are UI primarily, and because we have the document API as well, you have people that want to access it that way. So because you have multimodal access, it allows a lot of different people to interact with the data products. But primarily, it's that the domain team understands the data, and it kind of feels like I'm preaching to the converted a little bit, speaking to the data mesh community, because
don't assume that. There's a lot of contention in data mesh right now. So go ahead.
But the domain team understand the data better than anybody else. We have lots of experience of going into organizations where we have to work with data archaeologists, people who are experts in what the hell is going on in column 42, that's titled AXU, and nobody can remember what that is. So there's archaeologists, and they want to build robust data products that they can serve up, that they can improve, but they don't have the tooling or the institutional support to do so, because there is a central team of people working in a data warehouse typically that feel they own all of this, but yet they're not delivering for the projects that require it. We're also trying to start working with some financial services, and what we hear a lot there is that it's like a reverse centrifuge. The edge of the organization has so many priorities and projects, and wants to get started on them today, but they are slowed down by having to go through this rigmarole of data warehouses. And during COVID in particular, I think that a lot of that just fell apart because the teams were just getting on with their work, and in a messy way often, because there wasn't that established practice of domain teams being able and empowered to build and serve up data products for the organization.
I think it's an interesting point, right? I mean, we've seen a lot of pressure from COVID, and I don't think the data conversation of that has really gotten enough attention. I think it's a good point. When you find your ideal customer profile, and retail, I think is a great example, right? Retail infrastructure environments are incredibly fragmented. You found your ideal customer. Let's say it's retail, let's say it's financial services. What's the rollout look like? Like, what challenges do they face getting TerminusDB into production?
Oh, like that is just amazing how many challenges there can be and how varied those challenges can be on deployment. So we until very recently didn't have a cloud hosted version of Terminus DB. So we were doing, mostly on-prem delivery. On-prem delivery brings you into a world, a wild and wonderful world of a variety of different setups and a variety of different hot topics that people just like to do in data. I always find that people in our world are they feel like they're not people that can be marketed to. But yet there are just an endless number of crazes of things that people want to get behind. So the one that we run into a lot, and actually it's something that we do, like we host our stuff on Kubernetes and we want to, but we run into a lot of customers who are like, no, I want to do it on Kubernetes. And you're saying, well, it's just one node. I don't think there's any point in doing Kubernetes. And they're like, no, I want to do Kubernetes because, that's important to me to be an organization that is doing things in Kubernetes.
That's really interesting, right? They're kind of just like cargo culting on Kubernetes, even though it's just one node.
Yeah, exactly. So we do it. We'll deliver it for people. And then you get into, people might be in Azure, they might be in AWS, they might be in GCP. And that's definitely a lot of complexity. So that's one of the reasons that now we're in beta in our managed service, which is called Terminus X. And hopefully we'll be able to kind of get around a lot of those delivery problems just by managing that out to people in a much more controlled and straightforward way.
Yeah. So if you're running a hosted solution, right, or a managed solution, I think every startup has to have that today, right? Especially, regardless of what space you're in, you got to have a managed offering. How does it work if data's on-prem and I want to use Terminus X in a given cloud? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, we'll deploy on-prem. We've no problem deploying on-prem. That's not an issue. Now, it depends. Obviously, it's a bit complicated if some stuff wants to be on the cloud and some stuff wants to be on-prem.
That's specifically what I'm asking, right? If you got this kind of hybrid data environment, is that something that do I have to kind of split my deployment, right? An on-prem instance and a cloud instance?
Yeah, you probably do. I mean, we have an object store backend, which will help a little bit with your cloud stuff. But because we can just deploy into any blob store that you might have around the place. And it also, that helps with moving data. But if you've got stuff that's necessarily on-prem, we don't really have some sort of virtualization or something like that can really help at the moment. So you'd probably have to go for two deploys. But I haven't yet come across that problem, but I'll double back to you, Nick, when I hit that one, and I'll get your advice.
Happy to help. You mentioned some customer wins kind of in abstract. Are there specific customer wins you can call out? You don't have to mention customer names, different industry is fine, but what does success look like for these customers?
So success looks like people that build data products, that are using the versioning, that are then serving it up to the rest of the organizations. The one that I highlight is in retail, where we went in, we were building end-to-end machine learning pipelines on the back of the knowledge graph. But what we really delivered in the end was a version data product for their warehouse information. So of what products were moving around the warehouse. Relatively simple stuff potentially, but incredibly powerful for them to have a functioning data product that they can then serve up to a whole range of different use cases. And prior to that, it was data that was kind of sucked out, dumped somewhere. Nobody really built a robust schema for it because people didn't understand what was in there. People sucked out tiny bits of it here and there. Now they have a robust product that's managed by a domain team that understand what's in the data, that understand what the problems are with the data, that are able to, surface that much better to downstream users who are building more and more complicated data workflows off the back of it. So building kind of machine learning and stuff like that to do predictive analytics. So
that's a good story.
And then another one that we work with is in MarTech. So we work with a few MarTech companies to try and build sort of marketing data products based on different bits of their marketing data. So again, it's another area where I think where you've got a lot of subscriber information that might be disparate across an organization, that might not be as well managed. Being able to access that in a cohesive way through a series of data products just makes a lot of sense.
It's interesting because both of those sectors are areas with huge amount of fragmentation in their data setup. That's an interesting story. So you mentioned you got Terminus X. I think that's in beta. That's going to be your managed solution. And there's also an on-prem offering. So which clouds is your managed offering going to be in?
GCP.
GCP today? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, do you find
we
that
have GCP? So go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, do you find that a lot of your prospects are in GCP today, or is that just the most fluent for you to deploy to today?
Well, Nick, I'll tell you the honest truth. So we were in AWS, and we ran out of our 100K of free credits that they give to startups. So we took the 100K of free credits from GCP, and then we stuck there. So what we'll probably do is we'll roll out an AWS version next, and then probably an Azure version after that.
And whoever else offers the most credits, so IBM and then Oracle. Yeah. Makes sense. You do what you have to do as a startup, At
the beginning, I mean, it's a clever model for them because they've just got to get the timing right of when you really hit production. And then it's just a nightmare to move your core to another cloud. So the cost isn't right, but GCP are the ones that got the timing right for us.
All right. So TerminusDB sounds like it's a good fit in a kind of a data mesh world for very data product centric types of deployment. Where can people find you and find it?
TerminusDB.com. So we're out there. We're on Discord. We run a very active community on Discord. You can find it via TerminusDB.com. You can find me hanging out in there all the time. We run regular office hours in there. We have a Twitch channel. So you can come watch us live code on Twitch as well.
Very cool. Twitch is something I'm trying to get more active in for Cribl. All right. Well, thank you. Any closing thoughts? Anything else you'd like to share that I didn't ask?
Nothing else in particular. I mean, it was great to talk to you. TerminusDB is our name comes from the Foundation series of science fiction novels, and Apple's about to launch a big series about it. So we're
looking forward to that. Yeah,
we're looking for a big uplift because people are going to start seeing Terminus out there. And there's also a machine learning startup that I came across called Selden, which is based in London, and they're an ML platform. And their name also comes from the Foundation series. So I'm thinking of forming an international alliance of
there we go.
of companies that have come from the Foundation series.
Sounds good. Well, listen, thanks for your time. This has been tremendously useful, and I'm sure the community will get some value out of it as well.
Thanks, Nick. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.